I'm 34, male, and I'm what you'd call the breadwinner of my household. I run a small but thriving tech consultancy, which means I've worked long hours to get where I am. My wife, 32, works part-time, and we've always agreed that I'd handle the majority of financial responsibilities while she handled most of the household. Our marriage had its ups and downs, but I thought we were solid. That was until this vacation incident, where everything unraveled. We planned a week-long trip to Hawaii. It wasn't cheap, but I'd wanted to treat my wife and show her how much I appreciated her. The twist? My wife asked if her best friend, A, could join us. At first, I hesitated. A wasn't my favorite person. She had this way of inserting herself into situations that didn't concern her, but my wife argued it would make the trip more fun. Begrudgingly, I agreed. Big mistake. We arrived at the resort, and I immediately noticed a making herself a little too comfortable. She commandeered the best room in the suite, despite my wife and I paying for the trip, drank from the minibar like it was free, and even started making suggestions about how we should spend our days. Annoying, but I bit my tongue for the sake of peace. Then came the bombshell on the third day. Over breakfast, I casually suggested that I take a day to myself while she and my wife explored the island together. I raised an eyebrow, but didn't think too much of it until my wife agreed. That's when I noticed their odd glances. Something was off. I decided to let it slide, thinking maybe they just wanted some girl time. Later that evening, I overheard them whispering on the balcony. A's voice was unmistakable. "You need to tell him, or I will." I froze. Tell me what? My stomach twisted as I strained to hear more, but they moved inside before I could catch anything else. My mind raced. Was this about me? About us? The next morning, I confronted my wife. "What's going on between you and A? You've been acting weird since we got here." She hesitated, looking to A for support. That's when A smirked, this smug, self-satisfied smirk, and said, "Fine. If she won't tell you, I will." And then she dropped the bombshell. I said I was too controlling and that my wife needed a break from me. According to her, I'd been stifling my wife's independence, and this trip was supposed to be a way for her to reconnect. With A's help, of course. But here's the kicker. A demanded that I cut my trip short and let them enjoy the rest of the vacation without me. I was stunned. "Are you serious right now? I paid for this entire trip." A rolled her eyes. "And that doesn't give you the right to monopolize her time." My wife just sat there, silent, like a deer in headlights. That silence cut deeper than any words could. I refused to leave, obviously. If anyone's leaving, it's you, A. You've done nothing but mooch off this trip and manipulate my wife. That's when A's true colors came out. She started accusing me of being emotionally abusive, of isolating my wife, and other wild claims that had no basis in reality. My wife still said nothing, which felt like a betrayal in itself. But I wasn't about to let A's antics ruin my vacation or my marriage. I told them both I needed some space and went for a long walk to clear my head. That's when I started piecing things together. The late-night calls, the sudden secrecy, the way A always seemed to be around. This wasn't just about a vacation. This was about control. I wanted to drive a wedge between us, and my wife was letting her. When I returned, I found A alone in the living room, scrolling on her phone like she owned the place. "Where's my wife?" I asked. She smirked again. "Out. She needed some air." I'd had enough of her smug attitude. "Let's cut the crap. What's your deal? Why are you so invested in my marriage?" She laughed, a cold, hollow sound. "Because she deserves better than you. And deep down, she knows it." That's when it clicked. I wasn't just a meddlesome friend. She was obsessed with my wife, romantically. The way she clung to her, the way she undermined me at every turn. It all made sense. I didn't say anything, though. I wanted to see how far she'd go. The next few days were tense. I kept my distance, observing their interactions. I was relentless, whispering in my wife's ear, making snide comments about me, and even suggesting they extend the trip together. But I had a plan. Before we left for Hawaii, I'd been keeping tabs on our finances. I noticed some unusual charges on our joint account. Small at first, but they added up. I decided to dig deeper. While A and my wife were out one afternoon, I accessed my wife's laptop and found exactly what I was looking for. Emails between her and A, plotting to use my money to fund their little escape. I had convinced my wife to open a separate account, and they'd been siphoning funds from mine for months. I confronted them that evening. Care to explain this? I asked, holding up screenshots of the emails. My wife's face turned pale. A, on the other hand, didn't even flinch. So what? You got plenty of money. That was the final straw. I told A to pack her things and leave immediately. When she refused, I called hotel security. She kicked and screamed, but they escorted her off the property. Then I turned to my wife. We're done? She begged me to reconsider, claiming she'd been confused and pressured by A. But the betrayal was too deep. The moment we got back home, I filed for divorce and reported the unauthorized transactions. Turns out, A had a history of manipulating people and even had a couple of restraining orders against her. My wife was just her latest victim or accomplice, depending on how you look at it. The legal process was messy but satisfying. I froze the joint account before they could drain it further, and I sued her for fraud. She tried to play the victim in court, but the evidence was overwhelming. She ended up with a hefty fine and a permanent mark on her record. As for my wife, she got nothing in the divorce, no alimony, no assets, nothing. Looking back, I'm grateful I caught on when I did. It was painful, sure, but it taught me a valuable lesson about trust and boundaries. If someone seems too entitled, too manipulative, they probably are. After the court proceedings, I thought I'd feel more relieved than I did. The legal battle had gone in my favor, and I'd effectively removed both A and my now ex-wife from my life. But the emotional fallout lingered. Every now and then, I catch myself replaying conversations in my head, wondering how I'd missed the signs. The late nights when my wife claimed she was catching up with on the phone, the strange defensiveness when I asked simple questions. It all seemed so obvious in hindsight. But what I didn't anticipate was how far A was willing to go, even after losing in court. About 2 weeks after the dust had settled, I started noticing strange activity on my social media accounts. My photos were flooded with hateful comments, accusing me of everything from financial abuse to infidelity. At first, I thought it was just internet trolls, but the language felt personal. Too personal. Then I received an anonymous email with the subject line, "You'll regret this." The body of the email was filled with baseless accusations and threats to expose me unless I sent $5,000 to a Venmo account. It didn't take a genius to figure out who was behind it. I was back at it, trying to claw her way into my life one last time. Instead of panicking, I decided to play it smart. I forwarded the email to my lawyer and hired a private investigator. Within days, they traced the threats back to A. She'd been creating fake profiles to smear my name online and was using an encrypted email service to send the messages. Armed with this new evidence, I filed for a restraining order against her and took the case to the police. Cyber harassment is no joke, and in my state, it carries serious penalties. When the authorities confronted her, they tried to spin the same tired narrative, that I was the controlling husband, and she was protecting my ex-wife. But her digital footprints told a different story. The court didn't buy her excuses, and she was slapped with a hefty fine and probation. While all this was happening, my ex-wife reached out to me, claiming she wanted to apologize. She sent a long email explaining how I had gotten into her head and that she felt manipulated into going along with the scheme. She even admitted she'd been having second thoughts about the separation. I didn't reply. You see, her apology didn't come from a place of genuine remorse. It was a desperate attempt to reconcile now that she'd seen the full consequences of her actions. She wasn't sorry for betraying me. She was sorry she'd lost the life I'd built for us. And I wasn't about to let her back in. With illegally barred from contacting me and my ex-wife out of the picture, I finally started to rebuild. I threw myself into my work, poured my energy into my friends and hobbies, and even started therapy to process the betrayal. It wasn't easy, but I was determined not to let this experience define me. The biggest surprise came about 6 months later. One of my friends sent me a link to a GoFundMe page. It was created by none other than A, and the description was a masterclass in delusion. She painted herself as the victim of a vindictive ex-husband who had ruined her life and was asking for donations to start over. The comment section, however, told a different story. Apparently, some of her past victims had found the page and were sharing their own experiences with her manipulation. It didn't take long for the GoFundMe to get reported and taken down. Seeing that page was the final nail in the coffin for me. It reaffirmed what I'd known all along. It was a leech, feeding off the goodwill and resources of others until she got caught. My ex-wife, unfortunately, had been her willing accomplice. But the difference now was that they had no power over me. The revenge I got wasn't just about winning in court or exposing her for who she truly was. It was about reclaiming my peace of mind and realizing that I deserved better. Better friends, better relationships, and better boundaries. Life has a funny way of teaching lessons. This one was painful, but it forced me to grow in ways I never expected. And if there's one piece of advice I'd give to anyone reading this, it's this: trust your instincts. If someone in your life is constantly pushing boundaries, undermining you, or making you feel like the bad guy for setting limits, they're not your friend. And they certainly don't belong in your life. Thanks for listening. If you're into stories of entitled villains getting exactly what they deserve, stick around because I've got plenty more where this came from.